She despised humans, but the alien queen fell for one and bore his child part to life on the quiet world, settled into a gentle rhythm. Days passed with the rising and setting of the yellow sun. Lyra woke early to tend the garden she had planted with seeds Lily brought from Earth. Tomatoes, carrots, beans. Simple things that grew from dirt and water. She found peace in the work. Her hands no longer commanded fleets but pulled weeds and watered soil. It felt strange at first, but right. Ilara often sat nearby in a woven basket watching butterflies or chewing on a safe leaf. Her eyes followed everything with quiet wonder. Daniel built things. He repaired the shuttle's solar panels, turned scrap metal into tools, and carved small animals from soft wood for Ilara. He never complained about the loss of his old life. He never spoke of Earth with longing. Instead, he smiled when Ilara took her first steps toward him, or when Lyra laughed at one of Lily's silly jokes. Lily painted every evening, her canvases filled with the colors of their new home. The golden grass, the purple wildflowers, the soft blue of twilight. She painted Lyra holding Ilara under the twin moons that sometimes appeared in the sky. She painted Daniel fixing the water pump with sweat on his brow. These paintings were not grand, but they were true. Still shadows lingered. Lyra often woke in the night, heart pounding from dreams of Kalari warships descending from the sky. In these dreams, Vorik stood at her door, his eyes cold, his weapon ready. She would clutch Ilara close until her daughter's warm breath calmed her. Daniel always woke too. He never asked what scared her. He just held them both until the fear passed. One morning, a signal broke the silence. Not from the sky, but from deep underground. It was faint, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Daniel found it while checking the old comms array he had set up as a warning system. He called Lyra over. She listened through the earpiece and froze. The pattern matched Kalari emergency beacons, but older. Much older. It came from a cave system half a day's walk east. They left Lily with Ilara and went together. The cave was dark and damp, but the signal grew stronger with every step. Deep inside, they found a chamber lined with smooth black stone. In the center stood a pedestal with a glowing crystal. It pulsed softly like a sleeping heart. Lyra recognized it instantly, a memory crystal from the first age of Kalari expansion. These were placed on frontier worlds as archives of knowledge and history. Most were lost or destroyed. This one had been hidden, forgotten. She placed her palm on the crystal. Light flared. Images flooded her mind. Star maps, ancient warnings, a voice speaking in the old tongue. The message was clear. The Kalari were dying, not from war but from silence. Their minds had grown too rigid, too closed. They could no longer create new life, not because of biology, but because they had forgotten how to feel. The prophecy was not about a signal in the sky. It was about a child born of two worlds, a child who could bridge the gap between logic and emotion. Lyra staggered back, tears in her eyes. Daniel caught her. What did it say, he asked. She told him everything, the truth of her people's decline. The real reason the council had sent her to Viridia. They had hoped the prophecy was real but never believed it. Now she knew Ilara was not an accident. She was the answer. They returned home heavy with new understanding. That night, Lyra held Ilara longer than usual. Her daughter's tiny fingers gripped her thumb. Her eyes, silver like Lyra's but warm like Daniel's, stared up with trust. This child carried the future of two species in her blood. Weeks later, the sky changed. A single ship appeared on the horizon. Not a warship. Not the Jara. It was smaller, older, its hull scarred by time. It landed gently in the field beyond the garden. No weapons fired. No alarm sounded. Lyra knew who it was before the ramp lowered. Elder male stood at the bottom. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes sharp and kind. She had been Lyra's teacher as a child, the only one who ever encouraged her to ask questions. You found her? Male said simply as she approached. Lyra stood protectively in front of Ilara. How did you find us? The crystal sang, Male replied. Its song reached the outer colonies. We listened. For the first time in centuries, we truly listened. She knelt and looked at Ilara. The child did not cry. She reached out and touched Mael's wrinkled hand. The elder smiled. She has your eyes, Lyra, and his heart. Daniel stepped forward. Are you here to take her? Mael shook her head. We are here to learn. The council is broken. Vorik seized power, but his rule is fear, not strength. Our people are fading. We need hope. We need her. Lyra's chest tightened. She looked at Daniel. He gave a small nod. He trusted her. You cannot stay here forever. Mael said gently. The galaxy is changing, and she belongs to more than this quiet world. They agreed to return, but on their terms. Mail promised safety. No weapons, no guards. Only teachers, healers, and thinkers. Those willing to open their minds. Preparations began. Lily packed her paints. Daniel secured the shuttle. Lyra gathered seeds from the garden. Earth tomatoes, Kalari moon blossoms to plant on the new world. Ilara babbled happily, unaware of the journey ahead. The day they left, the sky was clear, the yellow sun warm on their backs. They boarded Mail's ship not as prisoners but as guests, as teachers. The journey to Kalar took 3 weeks. Ilara grew more curious every day. She pointed at stars, mimicked the ship's hum, and laughed when Daniel made silly faces. Lyra watched her with pride and fear. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. Old minds do not change overnight. When they arrived, Kalar was not as she remembered. The floating cities were dim. The singing mountains were silent. The streets empty. But as their ship landed, figures emerged from the shadows. Not soldiers, families, elders, young ones with wide eyes. They had heard the stories. They had seen the crystal's light. Ilara was the first to step onto Kalari soil. She wobbled on unsteady legs but held Daniel's hand tight. The crowd did not cheer. They bowed, not to Lyra, to the child. In the weeks that followed, something new began. Ilara played with Kalari children, teaching them to laugh out loud. Daniel worked with engineers, showing them how human simplicity could solve complex problems. Lily painted murals on the city walls, scenes of Earth and Kalar side by side. Lyra spoke to the people not as a queen but as a mother. She told them of love, loss, and hope. Vorek did not appear. His followers melted away when they saw the child who carried both bloodlines. Fear could not stand against wonder. One evening, Lyra stood on a high balcony overlooking the city. Below, Ilara ran through a garden now blooming with both earth flowers and Kalari vines. Daniel chased her, laughing. Lily sat nearby, sketching the scene. Mail joined her. "You gave us a future," she said. Lyra shook her head. "She gave it to us." The stars above shone brighter than before. The mountains began to hum again. Softly at first, then stronger. The people spoke more, touched more, lived more. Lyra no longer despised humans. She no longer saw herself as only Kalari. She was something new, a bridge, a beginning. And as Ilara looked up at the sky and pointed at a passing comet, her parents knew the story was not ending. It was just starting. The galaxy was vast and full of old wounds. But in one small corner on a world once dying, a child with silver eyes and a human laugh was stitching it back together, one heartbeat at a time. She despised humans, but the alien queen fell for one and bore his child part. 3 years passed, and Ilara grew tall and bright. Her skin held the deep violet of her mother's people, but warmed by the sun like her father's. Her eyes shifted from silver to storm gray, depending on her mood. She spoke both languages, Kailari with its flowing tones and human English with its rough edges, and often mixed them when excited. She ran through the gardens of the capital city, now alive with color and sound where once only silence lived. Children of both species played together, building forts from old ship parts or chasing glow moths through the twilight. Lyra watched from a stone bench nearby. She no longer wore royal robes but simple tunics woven by human hands and Kalari thread. Her days were spent teaching, not as a ruler but as a guide. She showed young Kalari how to feel without shame, and helped human settlers understand the deep logic of Kalari thought. Daniel worked beside her always. He had become a bridge too, not by title but by action. He fixed the old water systems using Earth methods and Kalari tech. He listened more than he spoke, and that made people trust him. Lily still painted. Her murals covered whole walls, now showing stories of unity. Kalari elders sharing star maps with human children, human farmers teaching soil care to Kalari botanists. Her art became a language of its own. But peace is never absolute. Rumors came from the outer colonies. Vorek had not vanished. He had gathered the last of the hardliners on a dead moon near the rim. They called themselves the Pure Blood and claimed Ilara was a corruption of the Kalari line. They spoke of cleansing, of returning to the old ways. Lyra heard the reports with a heavy heart. She had hoped time would soften their hate. Instead, it had sharpened it. One evening, as the twin moons rose, Ilara came to her with a question. "Mama, why do some people hate me when they have never met me?" Lyra pulled her close. "Because fear is louder than truth sometimes, but you do not need their love to be whole." Ilara nodded, but her eyes held a new shadow. Days later, a scout ship returned damaged. Its pilot bled from a plasma burn. Vorek's forces had attacked a supply convoy near the Nebula border. They used old Kailari war codes. Codes only someone from the inner circle would know. Mile called an emergency council. Lyra, Daniel, and Lily sat among the elders. The room was tense. Some argued for war, others for hiding. Alara stood at the back silent. Then she stepped forward. "I will go to them," she said. Everyone froze. "You are just a child," Male said gently. "I am Kalarian human," she replied. "They see me as a threat because they do not know me. Let me show them who I am." Lyra's heart ached. She remembered her own fear when she first saw Daniel, how judgment had blinded her. Maybe Alara was right. Maybe the only way to end this was to walk into the fire. Daniel looked at Lyra. His eyes said what his voice could not. He trusted their daughter. They prepared a small ship. No weapons. Only a message of peace and a single passenger, Ilara. Lyra gave her a pendant made of Kailari crystal and human steel. Daniel gave her a small wooden bird he had carved. Lily kissed her forehead and whispered, "Be brave." The journey took 6 days. Alara traveled alone as she insisted. She needed to face this not as a child, but as herself. Vorek's base was a hollowed asteroid wrapped in rusted metal. When her ship landed, no one greeted her. She walked through the dark corridors, her steps echoing. Finally, she reached the central chamber. Vorek stood there surrounded by loyalists. His face was harder than she remembered, his eyes cold. "You dare come here alone?" He sneered. "I came because you are afraid," she said. Laughter rippled through the room, but Vorek's face darkened. Afraid of what a feeling, he said nothing, but his hands clenched. Alara stepped closer. "You lost someone, didn't you, Zelence?" Then Vorek's voice cracked. "My daughter. She was weak. She could not bond with her mate. She faded. Because our blood is thin. Because we opened our doors to chaos." Alara's eyes softened. "My father says grief makes people build walls, but walls keep out light too." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small seed. It was from the garden on the quiet world. A hybrid bloom that needed both earth soil and Kalari mist to grow. She placed it on the floor between them. "This is not weakness," she said. "It is strength. To grow something new from 2 worlds." Vorek stared at the seed. His breath shook. For hours they talked, not as enemies but as wounded beings. Alara told him of her dreams, her fears, her love for both her parents. Vorek spoke of his loss, his fear for his people's future. Slowly the room changed. Weapons lowered. Voices softened. By dawn, Vorek knelt and picked up the seed. He held it like something precious. When Alara returned to Kalar, she did not come alone. Vorek walked behind her, not as a prisoner, but as a changed man. His followers laid down their arms. They asked to learn, to plant, to heal. The city welcomed them, not with cheers, but with open hands. Seasons turned. The hybrid bloom Alara gave Vorek grew into a vine that wrapped around the old council hall. Its flowers glowed silver by night and gold by day. People called it the bridge bloom. Alara continued her work. She traveled to distant colonies, teaching, listening, building trust. She never carried a weapon. Her voice was her shield. Lyra and Daniel aged side by side. Their hair grayed, but their eyes stayed bright. They watched their daughter become a legend, not for power, but for compassion. One evening, as they sat on the same stone bench where Lyra once watched her child play, Alara joined them. She was older now, her steps sure, her presence calm. "They are calling for you on the Rim world," she said. "The humans in Kalari there are arguing over water rights." Lyra smiled. "Then go," Alara nodded. But before she left, she knelt and placed a hand on her mother's knee. "Thank you," she said, "for choosing love." Lyra touched her daughter's face. "Thank you for showing us how." Daniel reached for both their hands. The 3 of them sat in silence as the twin moons rose. Far away on the Rim world, Alara stood between 2 angry groups. She did not shout. She did not command. She simply asked them to sit, to share water, to tell their stories. And they did. Because of her, the galaxy did not unite overnight, but it began to heal. One conversation at a time, one seed at a time, one child born of 2 worlds who refused to choose between them. Lyra often thought back to that first night on Viridia when she saw Daniel fixing a broken drone. She had seen chaos. Now she saw beauty in it. Messiness. Life. The stars above still burned cold and distant, but down here on Kalar and Earth and 100 new worlds in between, warmth grew, and in the center of it all stood a family. Once impossible, now undeniable. Alara would have children of her own one day. They would carry even more colors, more voices, more hope. The story did not end. It multiplied. And somewhere in the quiet between heartbeats, the universe whispered its oldest truth, that love is not weakness. It is the bravest thing of all. She despised humans, but the alien queen fell for one and bore his child part. Time flowed like a slow river through the united colonies. Ilara's name was no longer just a child's whisper, but a symbol, a quiet force that pulled fractured worlds toward each other. She did not rule. She did not command armies. She walked among people, listening more than speaking, and always carrying a small pouch of seeds from the original garden on the quiet world. Wherever she went, she planted one. Not for show, but as a promise that life could grow even in broken places. Lyra and Daniel watched from afar as their daughter became something neither of them had imagined. She was not Kailari. She was not human. She was both. And in that balance she found a kind of wisdom older than empires. But peace is never final. It must be tended like a garden. A new signal came not from war or rebellion, but from deep space beyond the known rim. It was faint, irregular, and carried a pattern no one recognized. Not Kailari, not human, not any recorded species. The council debated for days. Some called it noise. Others feared invasion. Ilara asked to investigate. This time she did not go alone. She asked her parents to come with her. Lyra hesitated. She had stepped back from the stars long ago, but Daniel took her hand and said, "We started this together. Let's finish it the same way." They boarded a small research vessel retrofitted with both Kailari thought shields and human navigation systems. Lily stayed behind to care for the growing school of mixed children in the capital, but pressed a new painting into Ilara's hands before they left. A swirl of unknown stars and a single hand reaching out. The journey took weeks. The signal grew stronger but stranger. It pulsed not in sound or light, but in emotion. Sadness, longing, a deep loneliness that echoed in Lyra's bones. They found the source near a dying star. A massive ship drifted there, silent and ancient, its hull covered in vines of crystalline growth. It was not built for war. It was built for travel, for survival. Ilara stepped onto the derelict vessel first. The air inside was stale but breathable. Walls glowed faintly with bioluminescent script unlike any language. Then they saw them. Figures in stasis pods lined the corridors. Hundreds of them. Tall, slender beings with skin like pale jade and long fingers curled in sleep. Their eyes were closed, but their minds, Lyra could feel them, were barely clinging to consciousness. One pod was open. A female stood at the far end of the chamber, her eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. She held a device that flickered weakly. When she saw them, she raised it not as a weapon, but as a plea. Ilara did not reach for a translator. She simply walked forward slowly, hands open. The alien woman flinched but did not retreat. Tears traced lines down her cheeks. She spoke in a voice like wind through glass. "We are the last." Through gestures and shared images projected by the Kailari empathy nodes, they learned the truth. Her people, the Jira, had fled their home centuries ago when a cosmic plague turned their world to dust. They searched for a new place to live, but every system they approached rejected them. Some fired on their ship. Others ignored their calls. They ran out of time, out of hope. Their children were born in stasis to preserve life until they found sanctuary. But the ship's core was failing. The pods would not last another cycle. Ilara turned to her parents. "We have to help them." Lyra looked at the sleeping faces. She saw Ilara as a baby. She saw Daniel's quiet courage. She remembered how her own people had once turned away from the unknown. "Yes," she said. They worked for days. Daniel and his team jury rigged power relays using parts from their own ship. Lyra used ancient Kailari resonance techniques to stabilize the failing life support. Ilara stayed with the Jira woman whose name was Nira, holding her hand as she watched her people sleep. Nira shared memories through touch, images of green skies and singing trees, of cities built inside living mountains, of a culture that valued harmony above all. They were not warriors. They were gardeners of the soul. When the last pod stabilized, Nira wept. "You did not have to do this," she said. Ilara smiled. "My parents taught me that kindness is never wasted." They brought the Jira ship back to the nearest colony world, a place once barren now blooming with hybrid crops and shared homes. The people there did not hesitate. They cleared space-built shelters and welcomed the newcomers with open arms. It was not perfect. Misunderstandings happened. Old fears surfaced. But Ilara walked between the groups, translating not just words but feelings. She showed the Jira how to plant earth vegetables. She taught humans how to listen to the subtle songs of Jira healing crystals. Lyra watched her daughter and felt a swell of pride so deep it hurt. This was the future she had once feared, messy, unpredictable, full of risk, and more beautiful than any ordered empire. Back on Kylar, the bridge bloom now covered half the city, its roots intertwined with old Kalari stone and human brick. Children played beneath its glowing flowers. Elders sat in its shade sharing stories. One evening, Lyra and Daniel walked through the garden they had first planted years ago. The tomatoes still grew. The moon blossoms still opened at dusk. Time had weathered their faces, but not their bond. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you never came down to Viridia?" he asked. She took his hand. "I would have stayed a queen of silence. You gave me a voice." He kissed her forehead. "And you gave me a home among the stars." Ilara joined them later that night. She had just returned from the Jira settlement. "They named their first child after you," she told Lyra. Lyra's eyes filled. "What did they call Heralara?" The name hung in the air like a promise. In the months that followed, the Jira began to heal. They shared their knowledge of bioharmonics, which helped restore damaged ecosystems on 3 colony worlds. In return, humans taught them engineering and Kaolari taught them mental discipline. The galaxy was changing not through conquest but through connection. But Ilara knew the work was never done. New signals would come. New strangers would arrive. And someone would always be afraid. So she kept walking, kept listening, kept planting seeds. One day while visiting a remote outpost, she met a young Kalari boy who refused to speak to humans. He sat alone drawing in the dirt. Ilara sat beside him, not too close. She pulled out a seed and planted it without a word. The next day she came back. The boy watched. The 3rd day he handed her a stone to mark the spot. By the 5th day he spoke. That was how it happened, not with speeches or treaties, but with small acts of trust. Lyra and Daniel grew older. Their steps slowed, but their hearts stayed light. They spent their days in the garden or teaching at the school Lily had started. They told stories of the old days. The crimson sky of Viridia, the fear, the first touch, the birth of hope. Children listened wide-eyed. They could not imagine a time when Kalari and humans did not share meals or songs or dreams. That was the greatest victory of all. Ilara never married in the old ways. She chose no single path. She loved deeply but freely. And when she finally had a child of her own, it was with a Zira healer named Kalen. The baby had jade-green skin, silver eyes, and a laugh that sounded like rain on leaves. At the naming ceremony, Lyra held her grandchild and whispered the old Kalari blessing for new life. Daniel added a human lullaby. Nira sang a Zira harmony. 3 voices, 1 song. As the years passed, the story of the queen who fell for a human spread far and wide, but those who lived it knew the truth. It was never about falling. It was about rising together. The universe was vast and often cruel, but in one quiet corner of it, love had taken root, and from that root grew a forest of hope that no war, no fear, no silence could ever erase. And every night, when the twin moons rose over Kylar, their light touched the bridge, bloom, and for a moment the whole world glowed with the color of something new. She despised humans, but the alien queen fell for one and bore his child part. 5 the years settled like soft dust over the united worlds. Ilara's daughter Sira grew fast, her jade-green skin darkening with each season, her silver eyes already watching the stars with quiet curiosity. She spoke 3 languages before she could tie her shoes, and often wandered into the gardens to talk to the bridge bloom, as if it could answer. Lyra watched her with a heart full of wonder. This child was the living proof that love could cross not just 2 worlds but 3. Daniel's hair was white now, his hands rough from decades of building and repairing. He still carved small animals, but now they were for Sira, a bird with Kalari wings, a fish with Jira scales. He sat with her every evening telling stories of earth oceans and Kalari mountains and the quiet world where it all began. Lyra moved slower, but her mind remained sharp. She taught the youngest children not with lessons but with questions. Why do you think the flower bends toward the sun? What would you say to someone who is afraid of you? How do you listen with your heart? Not just your ears. The children loved her because she never made them feel small. Peace had taken root, but like any living thing, it needed care. New colonies sprouted on distant moons, and some still struggled with old fears. A group of human settlers once refused to share water with a Jira farming pod. Ilara went to them not with force but with seeds. She planted a bridge bloom between their fields and sat in the dirt for 3 days without speaking. On the 4th day, the human elder brought her water. By the 5th, they were working side by side. Sira watched all this. She learned early that change did not come from loud voices but from steady presence. One morning, a strange tremor shook the capital, not from the ground but from the sky. The great observatory detected a ripple in subspace, a wave of silence spreading outward from a dead zone near the galactic core. Comms failed. Ships lost navigation. Even the bridge bloom dimmed for a full cycle. Alara gathered the council. The Zira elders, the human engineers, the Kalari thinkers. No one knew what it was. Some feared a weapon. Others thought it was the end of the universe itself. Sira stood at the back of the room, small but still. She raised her hand. Everyone turned. She was only 8, but they had learned to listen. "What if it is not an attack?" she said. "What if it is a call?" Silence filled the chamber. Alara knelt beside her. "What do you mean?" Ira looked at the star map glowing above them. "When I am sad, I do not shout. I go quiet. Maybe something out there is sad too." Lyra felt a chill. The child was right. The signal was not hostile. It was grieving. They prepared a ship again. This time Sira insisted on going. Alara hesitated, but Lyra placed a hand on her shoulder. "She has your blood and your father's heart. Let her fly." So they went. The grandmother, the mother, and the child, aboard a vessel named the Quiet Hope. It carried no weapons, only sensors, empathy nodes, and a pouch of bridge bloom seeds. The journey into the dead zone was long and eerie. Stars vanished behind them. Time felt thin. Sira did not sleep. She sat at the viewport humming a lullaby that mixed Kalari chants, Jira harmonies, and human nursery rhymes. They found the source near a black hole wrapped in ghostly rings of frozen light. There floated a structure unlike anything they had seen, a sphere of woven metal and living crystal pulsing with slow sorrow. As they drew closer, images flooded their minds. Not words, but feelings. Loss. Regret. Loneliness so deep it had turned to stone. Sira unbuckled her seat harness and floated to the front. "Mama, I need to go out there." Alara's breath caught. "It is too dangerous." But Lyra saw the truth in the child's eyes. She is not asking, she is answering. They opened the airlock. Sira wore a simple suit lined with Kalari warmth and Jira breath filters. She carried nothing but a single seed. She stepped onto the surface of the sphere. It was cold but not empty. Beneath her feet she felt a heartbeat, faint but real. She knelt and pressed the seed into a crack in the metal. Then she placed her small hand over it and began to sing. Not loud, not proud, just soft and true. The song was old. It was the first lullaby Daniel ever sang to Alara, the same one Alara sang to Sira, the same one Lyra had learned from watching human mothers on Viridia. As she sang, the sphere trembled. Light returned to the dead zone. Stars blinked back into view. And from deep within the structure a voice spoke, not in sound but in shared thought. "You came." Sira nodded. "We heard you." The being revealed itself not as a monster but as a guardian. Long ago it had watched over a civilization that vanished in a great fire. It stayed behind to keep their memory alive, but over eons it forgot how to reach out. It had been calling for so long no one listened, until now. Sira stayed with it for 3 cycles. She told it stories of her family of gardens that grew across worlds of children who played without knowing old wars. The guardian wept stardust. When they returned, the dead zone was gone. In its place bloomed a nebula of soft blue and gold. They named it the Listening Veil. Back home, Sira became a quiet legend, not because she saved the galaxy, but because she reminded it how to care. Lyra held her granddaughter that night under the twin moons. "You are so brave," she whispered. Sira shook her head. "Bravery is just love that decided to move." Daniel laughed softly from the doorway. "That sounds like something your mother would say." Years passed. Sira grew. She traveled to new worlds not as a leader, but as a listener. She carried seeds and songs and always a small wooden bird carved by her great-grandfather. Lyra and Daniel knew their time was short. They spent their last days in the garden where it all began. The tomatoes still grew. The moon blossoms still opened at dusk. The bridge bloom now climbed the walls of the old council hall, its roots deep in both stone and soil. One evening as the sun set, Daniel took Lyra's hand. "Remember that first night on Viridia?" he asked. She smiled. "You offered me water, and you looked at me like I was a ghost. You were the first real thing I had ever seen." They sat in silence as the stars came out. Alara found them there the next morning, Daniel's hand still in Lyra's, their faces peaceful, their story complete. The funeral was not sad. It was a celebration. Thousands came, human Kailari Zira and others from worlds they had helped. They planted seeds. They sang songs. They told stories. Sira stood at the front and spoke only one sentence. They taught us that love is the bravest language in the universe. Afterward, Alara walked through the crowd holding her daughter's hand. She looked up at the sky and saw the listening veil glowing softly in the distance. Somewhere out there, new signals would come. New strangers would arrive. New fears would rise. But now there were more hands to hold, more voices to sing, more seeds to plant. The galaxy was still vast and sometimes cruel, but it was no longer alone. And in the quiet between heartbeats, the universe remembered the lesson of a queen who once despised humans, but chose to love one. And in doing so, gave the stars a new kind of light. She despised humans, but the alien queen fell for one and bore his child part. The crimson sun of Viridia hung low in the sky as the Kailari armada hovered above the human colony. From the command deck of the royal vessel, Jara Queen Lyra watched the world below with cold silver eyes. Her skin shimmered like polished obsidian under the soft glow of the ship's living lights. She had heard stories of humans, loud, messy creatures who built shoddy homes and fought over scraps. To her, they were little more than insects scurrying across a once pure world. Yet here she was sent by the High Council to investigate strange energy readings that matched an old prophecy. She did not believe in prophecies. She believed in order, logic, and strength. Humans had none of these. Her first surface mission was meant to be quick and silent. Cloaked in adaptive camouflage, she moved through the forest near the colony's edge. The air smelled of damp soil and burning fuel. Then she saw him, a human male alone near a broken irrigation drone. He was tall with sun-lightened hair and calm hands. Unlike the others, he did not shout or rush. He worked slowly, humming a soft tune that somehow echoed in her mind long after she returned to her ship. She told herself it meant nothing. Curiosity was weakness. Yet the next night she returned. And the next. On the fourth evening, she stepped out of the shadows. He looked up startled but not afraid. "You are not from around here, are you?" he said. His voice was steady. His eyes held no fear, only quiet wonder. Her translator rendered his words into smooth Kailari syntax. She expected him to run or call for help. Instead, he unscrewed the cap of his canteen and held it out. "You look thirsty." She should have refused. Accepting anything from a lesser species was forbidden. But her throat felt tight, not from thirst, but from something else. She took the canteen. Their fingers touched. A warmth spread through her like sunlight through deep water. She drank. The water was plain, but it tasted different, alive. They met again at dusk. He never asked her name or her purpose. He simply talked about his sister Lily, who painted sunsets with bright colors, about how he missed Earth's oceans and the sound of real rain. In return, she spoke of Kalar, the world of her birth, where mountains sang and cities floated on magnetic winds. She told him of the silent wars fought with thought weapons and how her people had grown cold and distant over centuries. He listened without judgment, without pity. Weeks passed. The High Council sent urgent messages. The energy signal had vanished. They ordered her return, but Lyra delayed. She claimed more data was needed. It was a lie. She stayed because of him, because when he smiled, something inside her unclenched, because his presence made the vast emptiness of space feel less lonely. One night, as Viridia's twin moons rose, he reached for her hand. "You do not have to go back," he said softly. She pulled away. "I am queen, my duty is not mine to abandon." "Then let me come with you." The word stunned her. No human had ever set foot on a Kailari ship. The very idea was unthinkable. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she saw not greed but devotion, and something deeper. Something that mirrored the ache in her own chest. She made her choice. She smuggled him aboard during the final hours before departure. Hidden in her private chamber shielded by royal authority, he remained unseen. The Jara lifted from Viridia, leaving the red sky behind. For a time all was calm. The crew suspected nothing. The council remained unaware, but secrets do not last in the void. 3 months into their journey, Lyra began to change. Her skin darkened to deep violet. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Fatigue clung to her like a second skin. At first she thought it was illness. Then she understood. She was with child. Kailari reproduction required deep mental and spiritual harmony between two of their kind. It had not occurred naturally in over 500 cycles. Yet here she was carrying life, human and Kailari woven into one. Panic clawed at her throat. If the council found out, they would execute Daniel and destroy the child, calling it an abomination. She told him that night. He listened in silence, then placed a gentle hand on her belly. "We will protect her," he said. She blinked. How did he know it was a girl he just knew? Their peace shattered days later. A sensor glitch revealed Daniel's biosignature, Chief Warden Vorek. A hard-eyed loyalist confronted her in the throne room, flanked by armed guards. "You have defiled our bloodline," he hissed. "The human must die." Lyra stood tall, her voice sharp as crystal. "He is under my protection. Touch him and you touch me." Vorek's hand hovered over his neural disruptor. "The council will hear of this." "Let them," she said. "But know this, I am still queen, and I will burn this ship to ash before I let you harm them." For a long moment no one moved. Then Vorek bowed stiffly and left, but Lyra knew it was only a pause. She began planning their escape. Using ancient royal protocol, she prepared a hidden shuttle stocked with supplies and cloaking tech. She would flee with Daniel and their unborn child to the Outer Rim, to a forgotten world where no one would find them. It meant giving up her crown, her people, her entire life. But for the first time she did not care. The night before their escape, she stood on the observation deck watching stars streak past. Daniel joined her, holding a blanket around his shoulders. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. She looked at him, then at her swollen belly. "I was never sure of anything until." They launched the shuttle at dawn cycle. Alarms blared. Pursuit ships scrambled. But Lyra had planned for this. She sent a decoy signal that drew the fleet away while their real shuttle slipped into a nearby nebula. For weeks, they drifted through cosmic dust, hidden and safe. Ilara grew stronger inside her. Daniel read to her from old Earth books. Lyra sang ancient star chants. In that small metal shell, they built a new kind of family. One that belonged to neither human nor Kalari, but to something new. Months later, they landed on a quiet world orbiting a gentle yellow star. The air was clean, the soil rich. They built a home from stone and salvaged parts. Lily, Daniel's sister, came after receiving a coded message. She brought paint seeds and stories from Earth. Lyra no longer wore royal robes. She wore simple cloth, her hair loose, her hands rough from work. She laughed more. She cried sometimes too, when she thought of her people, when she wondered if they would ever understand. But when Ilara was born, with soft indigo skin and silver-flecked eyes and tiny fingers that curled around hers, all doubt faded. The galaxy still turned. Empires rose and fell. But here on this quiet world, a former queen, a human, man and their daughter found peace. And though Lyra had once despised humans for their chaos, she now cherished, and their messiness, their hope, their stubborn love. Because in that chaos she had found something her people had lost long ago, the courage to choose her own path. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Daniel took her hand. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "The throne, the power." She looked at him, then at Ilara playing in the grass, her laughter ringing like bells. "I had a crown," she said softly, "but now I have a home." And for the first time in her long life, Lyra felt truly free.